Hi, everyone. Welcome back to The Language of Learning, the podcast that challenges educators to rethink what equity means and looks like for multilingual learners. Let's turn up the volume on multilingual learning.
We are your hosts, Shelby Mason
and Sam Bozin. And in every episode, we discuss theoretical frameworks of second language acquisition through the lens of real classroom applications and provide actionable steps to educators that promote authentic equity, inclusion, and empowerment in our schools.
We are so glad you're here with us today.
Mm-hmm.
We will be discussing the Behaviorist Theory, Sociocultural Theory, and Krashen's monitor model. Then, we will provide you with tools that you can implement in your own classroom tomorrow. Sam and I have learned a lot in our CLD classes and through our field experiences with multilingual students, so we can't wait to share.
Yeah, and we've already been chatting a lot about this topic off the pod, so let's just get into it.
Yes, okay. So the first SLA theory we want to discuss today is Krashen's monitor model, which is a 5-hypothesis framework for second language acquisition that was popularized by Stephen Krashen in 1982.
So Krashen's monitor model includes 5 hypotheses, which are 1, the acquisition and learning hypothesis, 2, the monitor hypothesis, 3, the natural order hypothesis, 4, the input hypothesis, and 5, the effective filter hypothesis. Now, I personally really like some of Krashen's ideas, while others are just, they're not for me.
Yeah.
For example, the effective filter hypothesis emphasizes that a relaxed environment reduces barriers to learning. As stated in the Individual Differences and SLA lecture, teachers should be mindful of creating a classroom atmosphere that reduces debilitative anxiety while encouraging constructive challenge.
Yeah.
This means that teachers shouldn't just dumb down or simplify content to make it too easy for students, but we should provide appropriate challenges that promote critical thinking and language development through relevant and comprehensible activities. Relevancy builds engagement. That is key.
Yes.
So students they need to feel comfortable emotionally and physically safe, and they need to feel truly valued in order to learn. Anyways, that is the effective filter hypothesis, which I love. On the other hand, I am not a fan of the monitor hypothesis because I don't really think that learners are monitoring and editing themselves constantly to reach this perfection of their output in the L2. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, there's definitely some hypotheses we will not be spending time on, and I feel the same way about the monitor hypothesis. I feel like it's a good reminder to teachers that we can pick and choose which theories we want to use in our classroom.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
But can I tell you which hypothesis I love?
Absolutely.
Krashen's input hypothesis.
Slay. Love it. I love it.
Yeah, the bottom line is that we want our kids to understand what we are teaching them at their level, right?
Oh, totally. I feel like that's the fundamental goal of learning.
And I feel like Krashen had the same idea. The input hypothesis says when learners are exposed to comprehensible input that is slightly above their current level of understanding, they are able to make meaning in their learning. He called it I+1. Which connects back to what you were saying earlier about constructive challenge versus debilitating anxiety for students. When it comes to learning and teaching, there's definitely a balance between providing too much information and not enough. And I think similarly, there's a difference between teaching content that is way too advanced and content that is within one's grasp.
Absolutely.
So CLD students need to be able to connect learning concepts to their schema and prior knowledge in order to understand them deeply. But when content is not made accessible through things like culturally responsive teaching, students can lose motivation and feel stressed. So teachers should not be info dumping on students about concepts that have no connection to their own worldviews and experiences, but rather we should make it concepts relatable, relevant, comprehensible, and appropriately challenging.
Absolutely. Shelby, you put that beautifully. In my opinion, it's just all about contextualizing abstract concepts to make them more concrete. I love that. All right, so that is some of Krashen's monitor model. The next theory we want to add to this episode is called Behaviorist Theory, which, according to Light Brown and Spada, hypothesizes that children acquire language through imitating the language they hear spoken. This perspective places emphasis on the environment, believing that children develop their language skills through stimuli like positive reinforcement, praise, or rewards. And in this theory, it's believed that children selectively imitate language that has given them praise, which can lead to a lot of variation in the quantity and type of imitation among children.
Yes. We see this a lot in the classroom with things like grammar drills and rote memorization.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I see it every day in the classroom. And for those of you who are listening, we're going to get into the details of what this theory looks like in a real classroom in just a few minutes.
Absolutely. Oh, and now that we have referenced the behaviorist theory, I want to contrast that with the ideas of the sociocultural theory.
Okay.
The ideas of sociocultural theory really relate back to ideas brought around by Vygotsky and the ZPD. And for everyone listening, the zone of proximal development is the gap between what learners can do independently and what they can do with support. Sounds like someone else we know, right?
Krashen.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. Unlike the behaviorist theory, which you kind of touched on, the sociocultural theory really promotes both social interaction and communicative-based learning to help CLD students reach L2 proficiency in an authentic way.
Absolutely. And all of this information is great to have, but what does it look like in a real classroom?
Sam, I'm so glad you asked that. And when I think about these theories and ideas in the context of the classroom, I think it really comes down to intentional use of differentiation and an asset-based pedagogy to facilitate language acquisition in our students.
So, yeah, absolutely. Basically, some students, like our CLD learners, they often need more support to reach the curriculum goals and become autonomous learners, which is where differentiation comes in. Differentiation, yeah, exactly. And differentiation, it's really important to me. I think it's a more reactive approach based on students' varying needs, unlike UDL, which is more proactive. But for CLD learners, differentiation can look like providing multiple modes for engaging with content, like gamified learning platforms or graphic organizers, visual supports like pictures and videos, and explicit instruction. Also, in the Art and Science of Language Teaching, Bryfonski and Mackey state that prior knowledge needs to be activated, and that many learners without a strong literacy foundation in their L1 will need to be explicitly taught to use cognitive and metacognitive strategies to read texts, which further supports the idea of explicit instruction. I mean, this doesn't mean that students are dumb, deficient, or less worthy. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Rather, it means that these students, they just need extra support to address their needs and to leverage their strengths, which is key. I think this is a really important distinction, though, and honestly, I've found that when we talk about this, we're mainly talking about students who already have skills in the L1. So, yeah, right. And I see the value of discussing further about how to support students whose L1 skills are not as developed in order to become, more equitable, social justice-oriented, holistic educators. For example, this may look like pre-teaching vocabulary, encouraging translanguaging, and utilizing bilingual word walls in our classrooms.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we have to partner with our students and work on building trusting relationships where we can develop skills and they can develop skills in the L1 and the L2, both languages, regardless of their starting points. The end goal can be the same and it should be the same, but the path towards that goal will change. And that usually means more explicit instruction, more scaffolds and support, but with a gradual release over time.
Oh, yes. I love how you worded that. I totally agree. And I think when we consider UDL and differentiation, they're both really promoting individual student proficiencies and ways of learning. And using these strategies in the classroom really emphasizes the fact that students learn and acquire language in different ways. So shouldn't that be reflected in our teaching?
Yeah, absolutely.
This also really relates to Krashen's monitor model that we were discussing earlier, which has had a major influence on the movement from structured-based to more communicative approaches to language teaching, like content-based, task-based instruction, things like that.
Oh, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I mean, as educators, our classrooms, they need to be safe spaces for students to show up as their full, authentic selves. And I think that's made possible through what you were saying, like based pedagogy and culturally responsive practices, and also components of trauma-informed education like unconditional positive regard.
Yes, we will do a whole podcast on trauma-informed practices because
Absolutely.
we are very passionate.
Absolutely. We'll circle back.
Yeah. Well, now that you've talked about it, let's dive a little bit into asset-based pedagogy.
Okay.
Because I loved what you said about addressing individual needs and leveraging strengths, because I think even with the wording you used, I think that promotes an asset-based mindset. And in the classroom context, I think this goes back to like what you said, building those relationships with our students and knowing our students means valuing their identities and applying them within the curriculum to help create deep meaning in ways that are tailored to individual needs. For example, let's say we're doing a social studies unit on building community. Why not apply students' funds of knowledge and background into the learning?
Absolutely. Like, we could invite community experts to the classroom to teach about a certain skill or a cultural tradition. Or we could use culturally responsive literature backed by, a class discussion, a whole class discussion or a small group discussion that utilizes translanguaging, which is part of affirming students' linguistic repertoires to make sense of new content and to bring their whole selves into the learning process.
Exactly.
I think these strategies, Shelby, I don't think they're not just helpful.
Right.
They are essential to building those trusting relationships with students.
I think that's so true. And I think this ties in really well with what Bryfonsky and Mackey state about how all learners will benefit from a language class that draws on inclusive pedagogies and supports those pedagogies with rich, authentic resources that accurately reflect the diversity of the language, culture, and multilingual populations around the world.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. It is. Thank you. Thank you for blessing me with that. It's just such a powerful connection. And you know what? It also leads to our favorite segment of the pod, identity and advocacy and language teaching. But first, a quick note from our sponsors. Ever wish you had a magic wand to instantly create stunning visuals for your classroom? Well, meet Canva. It's not magic, but it's pretty close. Canva is the all-in-one design tool that's transforming how teachers create.
Forget wrestling with complicated software. With Canva's intuitive drag-and-drop interface, you can design professional-looking
infographics to simplify complex topics, worksheets and activity sheets that actually look fun, eye-catching presentations that keep your students hooked, classroom posters, newsletters, and social media graphics for parent communication. The possibilities are endless.
Canva has partnered with the Language of Learning podcast to provide our listeners with a 20% discount code for the Pro Canva subscription. Ready to unlock your creative potential and make your classroom visuals shine? Visit canva.com/education and apply the code Language of Learning Pod to unlock your discount and unlock your creativity.
Welcome back. Now, let's get into it. Identity and advocacy and language teaching. I really don't think it would be the Language of Learning podcast if we didn't consider identity and social justice, as these SLA theories have very different implications for CLD students and learning in general.
Yeah, it's so true. And you know what I notice? I think that with the behaviorist theory, it could definitely lean into a deficit-based view of our CLD learners, because I honestly don't feel like it's taking into account individual identities, cultural backgrounds, or student prior knowledge.
Oh, I totally agree. It definitely doesn't. And I personally hate learning just solely through drills because I forget the material when it's just drills.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, what you said about sociocultural theory really emphasizes communicative-based instruction or fluency and meaning-making over perfection, which I connect with that much more.
Oh, yeah, and definitely. And I think oftentimes with drills, they can almost lend themselves more to like memorization rather than that meaning making and learning that comes from that.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Also, I want to point out that Krashen's monitor model, specifically the effective filter hypothesis and his ideas around comprehensible input, those help us as educators better meet the needs of our CLD learners so that they can make progress in both the L1 and the L2. Helping students maintain a low effective filter means that we should take on the role of a warm demander by balancing equity and rigor. And speaking for myself as an educator, my main goal is for my students to become independent, empowered, critical thinkers, and literate global citizens. And so it's crucial that I intentionally design a classroom atmosphere that is productive for all, not destructive.
Oh, I love that. I have chills,
Thank you.
honestly.
Oh, thank you.
I love that. And honestly, for me personally, I think to truly create an equity-centered classroom that honors cultural and individual identities, we need to connect what students are acquiring and learning at home to their learning in the classroom. CLD students need opportunities to connect prior knowledge to make meaning of content. And even in turn, this will lower anxieties and allow students to be able to take in comprehensible input in a way that effectively stores information in their long-term memory.
Oh my gosh, Shelby, so powerful. Now I'm the one with chills. Oh. I think the middle ground is what promotes equity, though.
Exactly, yeah.
I mean, by blending the elements of each theory, teachers can pick and choose what works for them and their students. Every classroom's going to look different. Each school year is going to look different, but it's essential that we consistently, critically evaluate how we show up as teachers in order to best serve and support our students, especially those who have been historically marginalized and forgotten in the past.
Exactly.
And I think what true equity looks like within the context of SLA is, that is what it is. I don't think it can be theory.
Right.
It should be asking ourselves, what do my students need to thrive?
Yeah, honestly, I totally agree. And I think that's just showing that's such a powerful idea for our listeners to hold on to. And it's when we think about learning is not linear or one size fits all. So why should teaching be those same ideas?
Absolutely. Yes, Shelby, 100%.
So honestly, in conclusion, there are many SLA theories out there, and I think they all both come with their pros and cons. And our advice to you is to look at these theories as a starting place, not an exhaustive list of strategies that work 100% of the time.
Absolutely. So take the ideas that you like from what we've said and do something that benefits your students. Try things out, adapt to what's working and what's not. And remember, we're just two people with our own ideas, just like the people who created these theories in the first place. This is Sam Bozin
and Shelby Mason
with the Language of Learning podcast.
Please join us again next week where we'll be interviewing two amazing professors in the culturally and linguistically diverse education department at MSU Denver, Dr. Andrew Walton and Dr. Astrid Sierra.
Thanks again for listening to the Language of Learning podcast, where we're turning up the volume on multilingual learning.
Yay.
See you next week. Bye.